This woman wore sexy clothes hoping to rekindle her relationship with her husband. To maintain her perfect figure, she diligently controlled her diet. Her name was Sunwoo. She had a happy, fulfilling family. But one day, while organizing her husband Taeho's clothes, a lipstick suddenly fell out of his pocket. Taeho casually made up an excuse to brush it off. Though Sunwoo didn't press further, she began to harbor doubts. That morning, Sunwoo encountered a medical incident. As the hospital's vice president, she handled the situation professionally and explained to the police it was standard procedure for airway intubation. After resolving the matter, Sunwoo returned to her office. When she untied the scarf her husband had placed around her neck, she discovered a strand of long hair a different color from her own tangled within it. This discovery left her unsettled for the rest of the day. Just then, her former patient Haijing arrived to invite her to a personal art exhibition. Observing Haijing's hair color, Sunwoo couldn't help but recall that strand of hair again. Haijing's remarks about a woman's age further fueled her suspicion that her husband might have a new lover. While picking up her son Junyoung from school, Sunwoo encountered her husband's former assistant, Mi-an. During their casual chat, Sunwoo unexpectedly learned her husband leaves work precisely at 5 p.m. every day. Back home, Sunwoo was still pondering these unusual events until her son showed her a cake design sketch, snapping her back to reality. Just as she was about to send the drawing to the custom cake shop, Taeho returned home with a bottle of newly purchased red wine. Sunwoo questioned her husband why he hadn't told her Mi-an was his secretary. Taeho made excuses to brush it off. Junyoung overheard their conversation from the staircase. Later, Sunwoo delivered some of the prepared ribs to her neighbor Yilin's home. She noticed Yilin was using the same brand of lipstick as the one in her husband's pocket. When asked about Taeho, Yilin hesitated, unable to speak freely. Moreover, Yilin's husband Jiho's comment about Taeho's philandering ways made Sunwoo unable to stop overthinking. After returning home, Sunwoo saw her husband's phone charging. Taking advantage of the moment while her husband was showering, Sunwoo checked his phone but found nothing unusual. Just as she began doubting her own suspicions, an advertisement text from a shop named Hope arrived. She silently committed it to memory. The next day, Sunwoo confided her doubts about her husband to her colleague Mingsu. Mingsu thought she was being overly sensitive and advised her to rest, but Sunwoo couldn't let it go. Recalling Mi-an's mention that Taeho finished work at 5, she asked Yilin to watch her son and went to follow her husband to his workplace. Seeing him enter a store, Sunwoo prepared to get out of the car, but witnessed a couple arguing. The woman was Han Rei, the patient who had previously asked her for sleeping pills. Just then, Taeho emerged from the store carrying flowers and a cake. Sunwoo, who had intended to help, could only give up. When she followed her husband to the nursing home, she discovered he was visiting his mother. She apologized to her husband. However, when she inquired at the information desk, she learned Taeho didn't visit every day, and this was his first visit this year. Yet Taeho claimed he came daily. This forced Sunwoo to doubt her husband once more. That evening, her son suddenly told Sunwoo that the daughter of his father's secretary mentioned her mother had a boyfriend after the divorce. This deepened Sunwoo's suspicions. Later, Taeho claimed he wanted to meet Chairman Binggu and insisted on attending his wife Haijing's solo exhibition. Since Sunwoo was also invited, she proposed going together. This immediately made Taeho feel uneasy. At the exhibition, Taeho greeted the chairman but received no response. To ease her husband's awkwardness, Sunwoo approached Chairman Binggu's wife, Haijing. Haijing, feeling grateful, encouraged her husband to speak more with Taeho. While chatting with Haijing, Sunwoo noticed the wine served at the exhibition matched the bottle Taeho had brought home. Her suspicions began to stir once more. Haijing then introduced her daughter, Da-king, to Sunwoo. Sunwoo responded politely. She then went out to the balcony. There, she encountered Han Rei, the woman who had been beaten by her boyfriend. Sunwoo expressed her apologies to Han Rei and shared her own fears and anxieties. Han Rei advised Sunwoo that if she could find evidence, she could kick her husband out of the house. This resolved Sunwoo to find proof of her husband's infidelity. Offering to prescribe sleeping pills as payment, she enlisted Han Rei to follow Taeho. Han Rei drove behind Taeho to a villa district. 3 hours later, she saw Taeho and a woman descend from upstairs. They embraced intimately. Han Rei relayed this scene to Sunwoo and photographed the other woman's license plate. Sunwoo was heartbroken upon learning this. She picked up the birthday cake designed by her son and collected him from school. Before handing the prescription to Han Rei reminded her that Taeho seemed to be hiding something in his car's trunk. That day, Sunwoo brought her son to the birthday party she had arranged for her husband. She spotted the car she suspected belonged to her husband's affair partner, but the family getting out of the car turned out to be Haijing's. She began to suspect Haijing was her husband's mistress. To uncover the truth, Sunwoo obtained find her husband's car keys under the pretense of taking photos. Inside the toolbox in the trunk, she discovered a backpack. It contained daily necessities and a mobile phone. Towering it on, she saw a young, beautiful woman on the screen. This woman was none other than Haijing's daughter, Docking. Even more shocking were photos on the phone showing her own friends out on trips with Taeho and Docking. There was also a text from her colleague Mingsu reminding Taeho that Sunwoo had discovered the affair. Only then did Sunwoo realize she had been kept in the dark by those closest to her. Her seemingly perfect life was nothing but a sham. Sunwoo couldn't accept this reality. In her pain and rage, she searched for a way to cope. Sunwoo then arrived at the banquet venue. She recalled scene after scene since marrying her husband. The irony grew heavier in Sunwoo's heart. In fury, she plunged a scalpel into her husband's chest. Suddenly, her son's cry snapped her out of her fantasy. The banquet continued as usual. Taeho thanked everyone at the banquet and solemnly expressed gratitude to his wife. He even publicly declared his love to Sunwoo. Amidst the crowd's cheers, Sunwoo forced herself to kiss her husband, suppressing her disgust. Nearby, Docking watched their affectionate display with intense jealousy. To console Docking, Taeho even took her hand privately. Little did he know Sunwoo witnessed it all. She understood these people were covering for her husband's infidelity. Sunwoo resolved to exact revenge on both her husband and his mistress. She then approached Haijing. Seeing Docking, Sunwoo implied she shouldn't attend such gatherings. Docking, however, sarcastically remarked that Sunwoo, being older, should pay more attention to her health. Meanwhile, Ji-hoo, drunk, teased Taeho about his confession to Sunwoo. Unexpectedly, this provoked Taeho. Later, while Sunwoo tended to her husband's wounds, Taeho repeatedly spoke to her with overly attentive words. This only made Sunwoo feel more disgusted. She made an excuse and left the banquet. Back home, Sunwoo finally shed her facade and broke down in tears. She couldn't accept being deceived like this by her husband and friends. Meanwhile, Docking was consumed with jealousy over Taeho's public confession to his wife. Taeho hurriedly explained he only loved her. Docking demanded he choose between her and Sunwoo. Seeing this, Taeho feigned intent to reveal their affair to the chairman. Guilty-minded Docking ultimately believed him. Yet their kiss was captured on camera. At the gathering, Ji-hoo superficially teased about marital affairs, but was actually subtly mocking Taeho's infidelity. In truth, he also harbored feelings for Sunwoo. Meanwhile, Mingsu spotted Sunwoo's son, Junyoung, returning home alone. Out of concern, she offered to drive Junyoung home. After dropping him off, she noticed something amiss at Sunwoo's residence. Sunwoo no longer concealed the truth, directly stating she knew everyone had been covering up her husband's infidelity. Mingsu lied, claiming she had only learned of it that day. But Sunwoo no longer trusted her. Taeho returned home drunk, oblivious to his wife's unusual behavior. The next day, Sunwoo went to work at the hospital, as usual, only to find Docking had come to the hospital and had an appointment scheduled with Sunwoo's clinic. During the consultation, Sunwoo deliberately asked Docking if she had been sexually active. Docking openly stated she had a steady partner, a married man, claiming he might be with her due to financial issues. Sunwoo ordered Docking to take a urine test. The results showed Docking was pregnant. In that moment, panic began to grip Sunwoo. She didn't know how to face what was about to unfold. Docking was also deeply unsettled upon learning of her pregnancy, because they both knew exactly whose child this was. Docking then sought out Mingsu for a gynecological consultation. After confirming the pregnancy, she asked Mingsu to help conceal it. Docking originally planned to have Mingsu arrange an abortion procedure for her. Sunwoo believed this approach violated regulations. However, neither realized Docking's entire display had been staged for Sunwoo's benefit. Before coming to the hospital, she had already taken the test herself. Moreover, the lip balm she used earlier had been secretly placed in Taeho's clothes by her. That evening, Sunwoo went to the bar where Hanrae worked, hoping to confide in her, only to learn Hanrae was absent due to illness. Worried Hanrae was being abused by her boyfriend again, Sunwoo rushed to Hanrae's home. Sure enough, she found Hanrae being violently assaulted by her boyfriend Dinkui. Using her professional expertise, Sunwoo warned Dinkui that she could diagnose him with mental illness through examination. She told him to let Hanrae go or risk ruining his life. She then took Hanrae to the hospital to treat her injuries. When Hanrae learned Docking was pregnant and planning an abortion, she thought it was a good thing. At least it meant their relationship wasn't that serious. Sunwoo didn't respond. Instead, she asked what Hanrae planned to do next. Hanrae said she still wanted to return to her boyfriend. This puzzled Sunwoo. Hanrae believed her boyfriend was just acting out because things weren't going his way. He wasn't a bad person. Seeing the pitiful girl before her, Sunwoo felt immense heartache. Hanrae's words touched Sunwoo's heart. Watching the harmonious scene of father and son, Sunwoo resolved to give her husband a chance to redeem himself. That day, after her son left, She confronted Taeho about his infidelity, if he could honestly admit it, and promised to return to their family. She was willing to forgive him this once, yet Taeho stubbornly refused to confess, even accusing Sunwoo of distrusting him. Sunwoo hadn't expected her husband to be so shameless. To completely expose Taeho's hypocrisy, Sunwoo had Mingsu inform him of Doking's pregnancy. Meanwhile, Taeho, unable to resolve his relationship with Sunwoo, received a call from Doking wanting to break up. Taeho tried to explain, but she hung up immediately. Shortly after, Mingsu's call came through. Learning of Doking's pregnancy, Taeho panicked instantly. He made up an excuse and rushed out. Mingsu was baffled by Sunwoo's actions. She couldn't help but wonder if Sunwoo intended to divorce Taeho. Sunwoo's motive was clear. She wanted to see how Taeho would choose. The outcome was obvious. Meanwhile, Taeho tracked down Doking. On one hand, he couldn't bear to abandon his seemingly perfect family. On the other, he dared not easily pressure Doking into terminating the pregnancy. But Doking told him, either divorce Sunwoo or end the relationship completely. After learning of her husband's infidelity, Sunwoo kept it to herself. She visited her mother-in-law at the nursing home, yet her mother-in-law seemed aware of her son's affair. She hoped Sunwoo would forgive Taeho. This left Sunwoo with a complex mix of emotions. She wasn't sure if her mother-in-law had known about the affair all along, yet these words clearly didn't sway her resolve to divorce. Returning home that evening, Sunwoo tentatively asked Taeho if the urgent matter he'd rushed out to handle that morning had been resolved. Taeho solemnly assured her everything was settled. He even promised never to make Sunwoo sad again. This gave Sunwoo a glimmer of hope. She believed her husband had completely ended things with Doking, yet she soon discovered Taeho was still in contact with Doking. Disappointed, Sunwoo resolved to divorce him. She consulted a lawyer about the proceedings. The lawyer informed her that to win the divorce case, she needed concrete evidence of her husband's infidelity. Relying on private investigators to obtain such evidence could expose her to legal liability. This advice left Sunwoo at a loss. The lawyer suggested she could follow her husband in public places and take as many photos as possible. Intimate photos would be even better. Meanwhile, Junyoung curiously asked his friend if there were any signs before his parents divorced. It turned out he had already sensed the unusual atmosphere at home. Elsewhere, while Sunwoo was bandaging Han-Rae's wound, Han-Rae asked if she had decided to divorce. Sunwoo believed divorce wouldn't solve everything. Han-Rae offered to assist with whatever Sunwoo needed. Sunwoo hesitated but appreciated the gesture. Later, while shopping at a bookstore, Sunwoo spotted Doking purchasing pregnancy and childbirth books at the checkout. Sunwoo's heart tightened. She approached Doking and asked if she intended to keep the baby. Doking beamed with happiness, explaining her boyfriend would divorce his wife within 2 months and marry her. Sunwoo couldn't help but let out a mocking laugh. She returned home with a heavy heart. Watching Taeho happily playing games with their son, her mind drifted back to her mother-in-law's words. At that moment, Sunwoo resolved to stop enduring silently. Upon learning of Sunwoo's divorce plans, the lawyer demanded she provide details of the couple's financial status. When she arrived at the bank, she discovered their household finances had already deteriorated beyond repair. It turned out Taeho had mortgaged their home 3 years prior. Now they couldn't even cover the interest payments. Worse still, he'd used their son's insurance policy as collateral for another loan. The couple's savings were now practically depleted. All these years, Sunwoo had earned every penny to support the family, yet Taeho had squandered it all on luxury items, like handbags for Doking. Sunwoo felt utterly heartbroken. That evening, she received a text from Taeho saying he'd have to work late again. This made her suspect Taeho was meeting Doking in secret, so Sunwoo drove to his company to catch them in the act. She turned on her phone's video recording and entered the office building. Her mind kept imagining scenes of her husband with Doking, but when she opened the office door, she saw Taeho and his colleagues working diligently. Feeling awkward, Sunwoo hurriedly left. Taeho watched his wife's retreating figure with a pensive expression. Later, Sunwoo visited her mother-in-law again and revealed she knew about Taeho's affair and his embezzlement of family funds. Though shocked, the mother-in-law sided with her son, blaming Sunwoo's domineering nature for Taeho's behavior. She even threatened Sunwoo, declaring divorce impossible unless she died. Sunwoo calmly replied she would make sure her mother-in-law lived long enough to witness her son's complete downfall. Unexpectedly, the next day, at the hospital, Sunwoo received news of her mother-in-law's passing. Rushing to the nursing home, she found Taeho weeping inconsolably. Though Sunwoo harbored resentment toward Taeho, she still arranged her mother-in-law's funeral properly. Yet at the memorial service, upon seeing Doking's parents come to pay their respects, Taeho first eagerly handed them their shoes, then personally poured them wine. At that moment, Ho's face showed not a trace of sorrow. Sunwoo watched this scene in utter disbelief, filled with disgust. Just as she stepped outside for some air, she happened to run into Mingsu. Sunwoo asked her what would happen if she divorced. Mingsu replied that divorcing too easily would invite criticism from others. She advised Sunwoo to think it through carefully before making a decision. Just as Sunwoo prepared to return, she saw Taeho take a call and head toward the parking lot. Meanwhile, At the memorial service, more and more mourners arrive. Ji-hoo was searching everywhere for Tae-ho. Sunwoo followed Tae-ho to the parking lot. She believed Tae-ho couldn't possibly do anything inappropriate at his mother-in-law's funeral. Just as she turned to leave, a familiar melody drifted through the air. It was the very song Tae-ho had played when proposing to Sunwoo. Curiosity drew her closer. There, parked in plain sight, was Doking's car. What shattered her completely was the sight of Tae-ho passionately embracing Doking inside. The betrayal was too much for Sunwoo to bear. Meanwhile, Ji-hoo also happened to arrive at the same spot. He soon spotted Sunwoo, her face etched with profound grief. After the funeral, Tae-ho's family returned home. Tae-ho embraced Sunwoo, thanking her for everything she'd done for the funeral. Sunwoo instinctively pushed him away, but she quickly put on a concerned facade. Sunwoo recalled her lawyer's warning. If she wanted a divorce, she must never let her husband suspect anything beforehand. She resolved to endure silently while secretly preparing her revenge plan. Meanwhile, Han-rae, following Sunwoo's instructions, knocked on Doking's door carrying a book about pregnancy and childbirth. She introduced herself as a new neighbor and presented a small gift. Sunwoo's revenge plan was officially set in motion. She met with the lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings. The lawyer cautioned her to control her emotions at all costs before the divorce. Tae-ho must not suspect anything, otherwise, it would work against her. Helpless, Sunwoo had no choice but to keep up the pretense in front of her husband. Just then, Han-rae called. Sunwoo was determined to obtain evidence of her husband's infidelity. Under cover of night, she quietly opened the trunk of Tae-ho's car to search for proof, but she found nothing. The next evening, Tae-ho prepared to leave under the pretense of work to meet Doking. Sunwoo then called Han-rae to help track Tae-ho's whereabouts. Soon, Han-rae spotted Tae-ho arriving. Han-rae had just returned home when Tae-ho arrived. She adjusted the dashcam, determined to capture proof, but as Han-rae prepared to go upstairs, she found her boyfriend already waiting for her. Han-rae ignored him and started to leave. Yet, In-kui suddenly ran over and rang Doking's doorbell. Tae-ho answered the door. Meanwhile, Sunwoo, unable to reach Han-rae, called Tae-ho instead. The sweet conversation between the two on the phone made Doking intensely jealous. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. However, Sunwoo now knew her husband's location. She intended to force herself to calm down through exercise. Instead, she encountered Ji-hoo returning. Ji-hoo stated he knew she had discovered her husband's infidelity. He offered to help her. He also planned to invite Sunwoo out for drinks. Though Sunwoo declined, her attitude toward him began to shift. The next day, In-kui arrived at the hospital, using footage from his dashcam to extort 30 million won from Sunwoo. Yet Sunwoo was more concerned about Han-rae's safety. In-kui refused to reveal anything, only demanding payment by next week. As Sunwoo raged over her inability to obtain proof of the affair, a nurse delivered a bouquet of flowers. The sender was none other than Ji-hoo. Faced with Ji-hoo's concern, Sunwoo felt a flicker of warmth. That day, Tae-ho and Sunwoo took their son to a restaurant for dinner. They coincidentally encountered Hae-jin and Doking, who hadn't secured a reservation. Sunwoo deliberately suggested they all dine together. Tae-ho had no choice but to agree. Dinggu soon arrived at the restaurant as well. At the table, Sunwoo feigned ignorance and inquired about Doking's love life. Tae-ho grew visibly tense at the scene. Doking's face darkened with displeasure. Dinggu hurriedly insisted her daughter had no boyfriend. Seeing the awkwardness, Junyoung tried to leave under the pretext of doing homework. Tae-ho volunteered to take his son home. After Tae-ho departed, Sunwoo relentlessly provoked Doking with her words, boasting that her husband was always devoted to family. Doking knew these remarks were deliberately aimed at her. Furious, she stormed out immediately. Back home, Doking wept bitterly in anger. Just then, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, she found Han-rae covered in bruises. Han-rae confessed she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. Already struggling financially, she was now suffering domestic violence from her boyfriend. She began envying Doking, who had both reliable parents and a loving boyfriend. Doking, however, gave a bitter smile, revealing her boyfriend was a married man. In Tae-ho's eyes, Sunwoo was an extremely arrogant woman. Little did he know Han-rae was on the phone with Sunwoo. Upon learning how her husband perceived her, Sunwoo resolved to exact brutal revenge on him. She meticulously dressed up and invited Ji-hoo to dinner. She asked Ji-hoo why men cheat. Ji-hoo replied it was simply a man's instinct. Ji-hoo then confessed his feelings to Sunwoo and invited her to a hotel room. He claimed it was a way to get revenge on Tae-ho. He even left the choice up to Sunwoo. Ultimately, Sunwoo made a bold decision. She accepted Ji-hoo's invitation. After their passionate encounter, as Sunwoo prepared to leave, she blackmailed Ji-hoo with his own infidelity, demanding he help investigate Tae-ho's company and personal account transactions. Only then did Ji-hoo realize he'd merely been a pawn in Sunwoo's revenge scheme. He revealed Tae-ho's company was already a shell entity. Not only had rent been unpaid for months, but employee salaries couldn't even be covered. This caught Sunwoo off guard, but she remembered Tae-ho's personal account. Ji-hoo then demanded another meeting with Sunwoo as a condition for accessing the information. Citing illegal inquiry risks, Sunwoo refused and left. Before she departed, Ji-hoo insisted he'd wait for her at the hotel. Taeho's wife's recent, unusual behavior, even staying out all night, had him growing suspicious. He seized the chance, while Sunwoo showered, to secretly take her phone for inspection, but he couldn't unlock it without the password. Worse, Sunwoo caught him red-handed. He fumbled his way out by claiming he was helping her replace the phone. That day, Yilin met with Sunwoo. She confessed she wanted a child, but Ji-hoo refused to cooperate. She pleaded for Sunwoo's assistance. Sunwoo firmly rejected her request. Later, Sunwoo met with her lawyer to discuss property division. In the lobby, she encountered Haijing. Haijing invited Sunwoo and her husband to visit their home. Sunwoo accepted the invitation. Sunwoo then met with her lawyer again. She informed him that Taeho had begun suspecting her. Upon hearing this, the lawyer advised Sunwoo to stall Taeho for another month. This was because a temporary asset preservation order had been filed regarding the property division. The court ruling would take about a month. Meanwhile, Ji-hoo waited at the hotel for Sunwoo but never saw her. He then unexpectedly showed up at Sunwoo's home. This caught Sunwoo completely off guard. Taking advantage of Taeho going upstairs, Ji-hoo began threatening Sunwoo. He claimed that if she didn't cooperate, he would tell Taeho about her plans to divorce. He then offered an enticing reward for her cooperation. Sunwoo ponders Ji-hoo's words in her study. Her resolve begins to waver. Just then, Taeho enters the study, mentioning her recent late returns. Sunwoo tells him not to overthink it. Taeho explained he hoped she'd spend more time with their son, but Sunwoo's troubles didn't end there. That day, a patient named Don-sik offered to take care of Sunwoo's husband. It turned out he'd long known about her husband's affair. He was also the one who secretly filmed Taeho and Docking earlier. Sunwoo refused his offer. She didn't want him meddling in her family affairs. Don-sik suddenly lost control, violently smashing things, and even injuring Sunwoo. As the situation escalated, colleague Yeon-ki arrived just in time to subdue Don-sik. Sunwoo, terrified, began struggling to breathe. Later, Yeon-ki speculated Sunwoo might have PTSD. It turned out that as a child, Sunwoo had witnessed her parents' car accident firsthand. This left her with lasting psychological trauma. Sunwoo had never been able to escape this painful memory. Just then, In-kui came looking for her. He threatened to report Sunwoo for prescribing medication to Han-rae unless she paid him 30 million won. Meanwhile, Junyoung, not seeing his mother arrive to pick him up, called his father. After picking up his son, Taeho returned home to find Sunwoo still absent and called Mingsu to inquire. Meanwhile, Sunwoo was drinking at a roadside stall. Her mind drifted to Yeon-ki's words from earlier that day. These thoughts intertwined with the childhood memory of her parents' car accident. Her expression grew distant and unfocused. She even entertained the thought of being hit by a car. At the last moment, she was saved by Kang-hee, the doctor she had previously fired. Sunwoo confided in Kang-hee about her situation with Taeho. Kang-hee urged her to take her son and leave. Sunwoo insisted she didn't want to be pitied. Returning home, she calmly washed the dishes. Finally overwhelmed, she broke down in tears. Taeho witnessed this but didn't approach to comfort her. Instead, he silently returned to his room. The next day, Han-rae went out to meet Sunwoo. Her boyfriend had asked her to keep an eye on Sunwoo and prevent her from doing anything reckless. But when Han-rae went downstairs, she saw Docking packing his bags. Learning that he had broken up with Taeho, Han-rae immediately relayed the news to Sunwoo. Sunwoo gave her the injury diagnosis report. She then called Taeho. The two headed to Haijing's house for the dinner party. Ji-hoo, knowing Sunwoo had agreed to meet that evening, told Sunwoo about Bingu's plan to invest in Taeho. Upon arriving at Haijing's, Taeho was visibly tense. At the dinner table, Sunwoo proposed a toast to Bingu's investment in Taeho, which surprised Docking. She began doubting whether Taeho was using her. Suddenly, Sunwoo publicly exposed Docking's husband's affair and mentioned Docking's past pregnancy. She sarcastically remarked that Taeho was still trying to evade responsibility. While Docking remained in love with such a man, Bingu tried to stop Sunwoo, but Sunwoo retorted that he should focus on controlling his own daughter and stop her from casually seducing men. Enraged, Docking lashed out and punched Sunwoo. The dinner party ended in an ugly scene. After leaving, Taeho confronted Sunwoo, demanding why she did this. Sunwoo declared she only wanted a divorce, and that Taeho would never see their son again. Taeho explained he never intended to abandon his family, but felt powerless when dealing with Docking. Seeing her husband justify his infidelity with such detached indifference, Sunwoo responded by revealing her own affair with Ji-hoo to Taeho. She wanted him to taste the sting of betrayal, yet Taeho shifted the blame entirely on to Sunwoo. Sunwoo countered that their son had long known of his infidelity. It was he who had personally destroyed this family. Meanwhile, Ji-hoo met his wife Yilin at a hotel. Yilin had long known of her husband's affair. Ji-hoo claimed he was merely playing the field. The couple argued fiercely over the matter. Ji-hoo admitted his fault but showed no remorse. Elsewhere, Docking spotted Taeho crouched by the roadside as she stepped out. She confronted him, demanding if money was the only reason he stayed with her. Taeho urged her not to believe Sunwoo's words. Docking ultimately couldn't let go of her love for Taeho. She told Taeho she hadn't terminated the pregnancy. She also declared declare she was willing to give up everything just to stay with him. Upon hearing this, Tae-ho held her tightly. The next morning, they awoke in bed together. Do-kyung joyfully planned their future. However, Tae-ho was preoccupied with Bingu potentially withdrawing his investment. Just then, the doorbell rang. Tae-ho received a package from Sunwoo containing her belongings and divorce papers. Refusing to relinquish the child or assets, Sunwoo threatened to collude with his employees to expose his embezzlement and fraudulent transfer of marital property, leaving him penniless. Tae-ho erupted in fury. Do-kyung wondered how Sunwoo discovered her home address, which inevitably made her feel afraid. Meanwhile, Sunwoo arrived at the hospital to find the atmosphere had turned strange. It turned out someone had posted hostile content about her on the hospital's official website. Sunwoo suspected Tae-ho orchestrated this to gain custody. At that moment, Tae-ho was preparing to go to the company to draft a new divorce agreement. He couldn't abandon his son like this. Do-kyung couldn't understand why he wouldn't give up. The two argued fiercely over it. Their quarrel drew the attention of Han-rae's boyfriend. Having failed to threaten Sunwoo, he revealed that Sunwoo had used Han-rae to track Tae-ho. Both were stunned by the revelation. Soon, Tae-ho arrived at the hospital. To secure custody of his son, he falsely accused Sunwoo of having mental issues and requested the hospital director to issue a psychiatric evaluation report for the custody case. Sunwoo wouldn't let him succeed so easily. She immediately left the hospital. Tae-ho realized what Sunwoo intended to do. He immediately drove after her. At a traffic light, Tae-ho planned to get out and persuade Sunwoo. Unbeknownst to him, Sunwoo deliberately rammed her car into Tae-ho's vehicle. At the school, Sunwoo took her son away from class. When Tae-ho arrived at the school, the teacher informed him that Junyoung had already been taken by his mother. Junyoung felt uneasy inside. Looking at his mother's solemn expression, he tentatively asked where they were going, but Sunwoo remained silent. Tae-ho tried to locate them using his son's phone, only to lose the trail, and Sunwoo discarded the device. Terrified, Junyoung snatched Sunwoo's phone to call Tae-ho, but moments after the call connected, Sunwoo hung up to protect him, nearly causing another accident. Soon, Sunwoo drove to a secluded spot. She led her son to the lakeside. Sunwoo pleaded for him to live with her. Junyoung begged his mother to forgive his father. Sunwoo, utterly desperate, even threatened suicide. As they argued, they approached the lake's edge. Junyoung slipped and nearly fell. Eventually, Tae-ho found his son's phone with police help. Sunwoo then called him, urging him to come home to talk. However, Tae-ho searched the house but found no sign of his son. He confronted Sunwoo. Sunwoo deliberately tells him he'll never see his son again. Tae-ho suspects Sunwoo killed his son. Enraged, he grabs Sunwoo by the throat and violently throws her to the ground. As Tae-ho crouches sobbing, his son suddenly opens the door and walks in, seeing his mother lying unconscious on the floor. Junyoung is terrified and frozen in shock. Tae-ho breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing his son, but Junyoung was utterly disillusioned with his father. Just then, Yilin arrived at Sunwoo's home. Seeing Sunwoo lying on the floor, she immediately called an ambulance. Through this incident, Sunwoo successfully gained custody of her son. Her lawyer also secured a favorable divorce settlement for her. The restraining order application was approved. Tae-ho was left with nothing. Dingu apologized to Sunwoo for his daughter's reputation, hoping she would drop the lawsuit against Do-kyung. While shopping at the supermarket, Do-kyung was pointed at by those around her. At checkout, she faced the cashier's cold stare. Returning home, she pleaded with her father to help Tae-ho. Dingu flatly refused his daughter. Seeing this, Do-kyung, heartbroken, declared she would cut ties with her father. Meanwhile, Han-rae, with Sunwoo's help, files assault charges against her boyfriend. Both she and Sunwoo escaped their predicaments. That day, Sunwoo visits the hospital. Ming-soo finds Sunwoo to apologize and informs her Tae-ho plans to leave the city. When Sunwoo encountered Tae-ho and Do-kyung again, she intended to treat them as strangers. Yet a new storm seemed to be brewing silently. Soon, 2 years passed. That Christmas, Sunwoo's hospital and a local women's organization held a family care event. She now lived happily with her son. However, an invitation once again shattered the peaceful life. It turned out Tae-ho, with Bingu's help, had become a renowned producer. Meanwhile, Sunwoo was attending the care event. Hae-jing, who had once left in disgrace after her daughter seduced Tae-ho, now made a high-profile return. She intended to invite local dignitaries to her daughter and son-in-law's family banquet. Sunwoo, out of courtesy, tried to greet her. Hae-jing, however, deliberately ignored her. After school, Junyoung's classmates discussed a newly released movie, mentioning that the film's producer was his father. Junyoung remained reluctant to elaborate, yet at that moment, he spotted his father whom he hadn't seen in 2 years. Tae-ho took his son out for a lavish meal and expressed his longing for his child. He then presented his son with a baseball bat and encouraged him to pursue his dreams. Finally, He invited his son to attend a banquet at his home. Tae-ho asked his son if he hadn't received the invitation. Jun-young looked completely unaware. Meanwhile, Sunwoo was clutching that very invitation. Just as he was pondering what was going on, the teacher's call came through. Learning Jun-young hadn't attended class, he grew frantic. He hurriedly drove out to search for him. Just as he left, he saw Tae-ho dropping Jun-young off at home. Tae-ho casually greeted Sunwoo, while Sunwoo, wary, warned him to stay away from her son. After returning home, Jun-young asked his mom if Dad had sent an invitation. Sunwoo admitted she had kept it. She inquired about his vacation plans, hoping to discuss joining the baseball team, but Jun-young felt his mother didn't understand baseball at all. Back in his room, Jun-young stared at the baseball bat his father had given him. Deeply conflicted, Sunwoo, too, was troubled by seeing Tae-ho again. She knew his return this time wouldn't be simple. Soon, the entire neighborhood was buzzing about the Sunwoo family. Even the nurses at the hospital were gossiping. Sunwoo felt as if she'd been thrust back into the whirlwind of public opinion that had engulfed her after her betrayal. Back at her office, she couldn't resist using her computer to look up Tae-ho's personal information. Sunwoo wanted to uncover the real purpose behind Tae-ho's return. After work, she called her son. Jun-young, however, claimed he was going to a friend's house and wouldn't be coming home for dinner. Sunwoo had no choice but to walk into a restaurant alone for dinner. Meanwhile, Tae-ho's family gathering was bustling with excitement. After work, Yeon-ki spotted Sunwoo drinking alone and approached her to chat. Sunwoo confessed she couldn't bear seeing Tae-ho's current success. Just then, Tae-ho sent a photo of himself with their son. Sunwoo's heart raced with anxiety. Ignoring Yeon-ki's pleas, she insisted on retrieving her son. At the party, Jun-young received an autograph from his favorite baseball player and encouragement from Tae-ho, which put him in an exceptionally good mood. Tae-ho then took him upstairs to an empty room and told his son it was prepared for him. Jun-young was visibly moved. Da-king, witnessing this, felt a twinge of displeasure. She called Tae-ho aside. She made it clear she didn't want Jun-young living in their home. Da-king then joined the group conversation. Everyone outwardly expressed envy over Da-king's life, but once she left, they began whispering about her. Just then, Sunwoo walked in. The room instantly fell silent. All eyes focused on her. Tae-ho rushed over, demanding to know why Sunwoo was there. He ordered her to leave immediately. He declared he'd take Jun-young back himself. Sunwoo insisted on leaving with Jun-young. She began searching for her son, but accidentally entered Tae-ho's bridal suite. Sunwoo saw Tae-ho and Da-king's wedding photos, and felt a sharp pang of pain. Just as she was about to leave, she was startled to discover the room's furnishings and cosmetics were identical to those she had once used. This left her utterly shocked. Sunwoo realized Tae-ho hadn't forgotten the past. Just then, Tae-ho burst into the room. The two began arguing again. Sunwoo pointed out that Tae-ho couldn't forget her. Tae-ho insisted he and Da-king were very happy. Meanwhile, Jun-young was chatting with classmates outside the door. A classmate teased her about having a beautiful stepmother. Jun-young, enraged, prepared to confront them. Sunwoo called her son back. After arriving home, Sunwoo and her son had a huge argument. She was furious that he had gone to Tae-ho's place without permission, but Jun-young believed his father understood his preferences better than his mother did. The next day, Mingsu received a call from Tae-ho. He said he was meeting with the director and invited Mingsu along. Tae-ho's other phone contained secretly taken photos of Sunwoo and Yeon-ki. He realized their relationship was more than ordinary. This sparked a new scheme in his mind. That evening, Sunwoo felt someone was following her on her way home. Even after returning home, she sensed someone watching her through the window. Fearing for her son's safety, she rushed to his room to check. Only after confirming he was unharmed did she relax. Meanwhile, Tae-ho was discussing hospital donations with the director and Mingsu. He used this opportunity to insist Sunwoo couldn't become vice director. A new storm was brewing silently. Just as Sunwoo was eating dinner with her son, a rock suddenly smashed through the window. The sudden incident terrified both mother and son. Sunwoo quickly shielded his child, his heart filled with fear and rage. Police arrived shortly after. Without surveillance footage, pinpointing the cause proved difficult. The officers promised increased patrols in the near future. Sunwoo immediately reassured his son not to worry too much. However, as Sunwoo was cleaning up the glass shards, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. The visitor was none other than Tae-ho. Just as Sunwoo hesitated whether to open the door, his son approached. Dan declared he had called his father over. Seeing the shattered window, Tae-ho immediately expressed concern for the boy. He then boarded up the broken window. Out of safety concerns, Tae-ho offered to take the boy to stay at his own home. Sunwoo flatly refused. Helpless, Tae-ho returned home alone. But as soon as he arrived, Da-king questioned where he had been. Tae-ho truthfully told his wife. Da-king's expression after hearing this was telling. Later, Tae-ho received a call from Mingsu. The two plotted how to bring down Sunwoo's position as vice president. The next day, as Tae-ho prepared to go to work, he received a call from his father-in-law. It turned out Bingu had discovered his secret investment in Sunwoo's hospital. He warned Tae-ho to watch his step. The next day, Tae-ho came to pick up his son, despite Sunwoo's deep reluctance. For the sake of his son's well-being, Sunwoo had no choice but to compromise. Soon, Junyoung arrived at his father's new home. Docking diligently played the role of a gentle stepmother, attempting to build a connection with Junyoung. After dinner, Tae-ho checked the time, ready to take his son home, but Docking suddenly spoke up, asking Junyoung to stay. She led him to a room she had prepared in advance. This touched Junyoung's heart a little. Unbeknownst to him, a shadowy figure clad in black and wielding an iron bar appeared at his doorstep. Unaware of the danger, Sunwoo continued sipping her red wine. Just then, she received a text from Han Rei. The message struck her as odd. The intruder smashed the security camera. Sunwoo heard the commotion and grew suspicious. The assailant then burst into the house. He shoved Sunwoo to the floor. At that moment, Yun-ki called. Sunwoo lunged forward to answer it, only to be kicked down again by the intruder. Yun-ki heard Sunwoo's cries for help and knew something was terribly wrong. He rushed towards Sunwoo's house. Meanwhile, Sunwoo was dragged by her hair into the kitchen by the masked man. In a critical moment, Sunwoo grabbed a nearby Y model and smashed it at him. Soon, police arrived on the scene. Hearing the sirens, the masked man fled in panic. Yun-ki arrived shortly after. Just then, Sunwoo received a call from her son. Junyoung asked if he could stay at his father's place, fearing her son would worry. Sunwoo agreed. Later, Sunwoo learned from Yun-ki that Yilin had called the police. Terrified, Yilin kept calling Ji-hoo, but Ki-hyuk was out on a date with another woman. Soon after, Tae-ho returned home with Junyoung. It turned out Junyoung had sensed his mother's unusual behavior and insisted on coming home. Just as he tried to ask what happened, Sunwoo sent him upstairs. Sunwoo then reviewed the surveillance footage, but couldn't make out the intruder's face. The next day, Sunwoo confronted Han Rei about her text message from the night before. Han Rei explained Mingsu was trying to remove her from her position as vice dean. Sunwoo then sought out Yilin. She suspected the man in black was Tae-ho. Yilin denied this, but she immediately told Sunwoo that Tae-ho had indeed visited her home earlier that day. Sunwoo was furious upon hearing this. She stormed straight into Tae-ho's company. Sunwoo knew exactly what Tae-ho intended. She firmly declared she wouldn't let him take their son. But in Tae-ho's view, Sunwoo was not a qualified mother. She hadn't even noticed their son was developing psychological issues. Tae-ho's words left Sunwoo speechless. Soon, employees reported Sunwoo's visit to Tae-ho's company to Docking. This news deeply unsettled her. The next day, she sought out Sunwoo, hoping they could coexist peacefully. Sunwoo retorted that if Docking wanted peace, she should first rein in her own husband. That evening, Tae-ho drove to a secluded spot. Sure enough, the shadowy figure was someone Tae-ho had arranged. The next day, at the hospital meeting, Vice President Sunwoo pointed out that while the obstetrics and gynecology department's recent infertility cure rate was high, complaint rates had also risen accordingly. Mingsu felt deeply dissatisfied upon hearing this. Back in her office, she called Tae-ho to ask why the president hadn't yet decided to fire Sunwoo. Coincidentally, Tae-ho also arrived at the hospital. He too was eager to know why the president was delaying action. However, the president informed him that Sunwoo wanted a private meeting with Bingu. This caught Tae-ho completely off guard. It turned out Sunwoo had met with the president the previous night. He had requested the president arrange a meeting with Bingu, claiming he would facilitate hospital investment. The president was overjoyed upon hearing this. Enraged, Tae-ho confronted Sunwoo, warning him to resign immediately. Sunwoo then produced photos taken from surveillance footage and confronted him, demanding if he had orchestrated Dinkui's actions. Tae-ho hadn't anticipated his scheme being uncovered. He urgently warned Dinkui to cover all traces before Sunwoo discovered anything. After work, Sunwoo prepared to meet Bingu with the director, but just then, she received a package. Opening it, she found a dead bird inside, along with a photo of her son, Junyoung. At the same time, Tae-ho also received a photo of his son. Sunwoo immediately went to the school to look for Junyoung. Through classmates, she learned no one had seen her son. Sunwoo anxiously contacted Tae-ho, intending to call the police. Meanwhile, the director and Bingu were still waiting for them at the restaurant, but the two were delayed by the search for their son. Bingu was very dissatisfied with this. Finally, the police found Junyoung. Sunwoo rushed over and thanked the officers, but Junyoung couldn't understand his mother's worry, thinking she was overreacting. Just then, a passerby bumped into Sunwoo. Sunwoo realized the person was Inkui. This made her even more anxious. Fortunately, Yunki arrived in time to comfort Sunwoo. Seeing Yunki appear, Tae-ho felt a pang of unease. Meanwhile, Dingu, having waited in vain for the two, decided to head back first. The hospital director expressed gratitude for the investment. However, regarding Mingsu's suggestion that Bingu reconsider, he pointed out that Bingu was simply not a suitable candidate for the deputy director position. Unexpectedly, Dingu insisted on removing Sunwoo and installing Yunki instead. Meanwhile, Junyoung retreated to his room the moment he got home, refusing to communicate with his mother. Yunki noticed this and worked to calm Junyoung's emotions. Gradually, Junyoung began began to settle down. Yeonki then urged Sunwoo to reduce his workload and spend more time with Junyoung, but Sunwoo refused to give up his job, determined to provide his son with a better life. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Taeho, worried about his son and wanting to visit. Sunwoo firmly refused. He revealed that the threatening packages he'd received were all In-kui's doing. He warned Taeho not to let In-kui threaten Junyoung, otherwise, he wouldn't let him off the hook. Meanwhile, Doking obtained an access card to Taeho's company from her subordinate. She went to Taeho's office and found another phone in his drawer. The phone was filled with photos taken while stalking Sunwoo. At that moment, she felt utterly disappointed. Elsewhere, In-kui received Taeho's bounty payment, but was dissatisfied with the amount. With a cold smile, he exposed Taeho's feelings for Sunwoo, stating bluntly that even though they were divorced, Taeho still wanted to possess Sunwoo. Taeho was furious upon hearing this, but couldn't refute it. Later, Taeho returned home. Doking was displeased to learn Taeho had visited their son again. The next day, Sunwoo apologized to the director for breaking their appointment. The director expressed hope that Sunwoo would care more for her own child. Sunwoo knew Mingsu must have told the director about these private matters. She angrily confronted Mingsu. The two argued fiercely over this. Mingsu retorted, asking why she never suspected Yeonki. Why was it him who ended up treating Junyoung? To resolve her doubts, Sunwoo sought out Yeonki. Yeonki revealed he had a similar experience as a child. He too had encountered Junyoung by chance. Seeing Junyoung's unease, he wanted to heal him. The director found Bingu's recommendation of Yeonki oddly inexplicable, so he sought out Bingu. Yeonki admitted knowing Bingu but claimed they had no connection. Yet that very night, he met with Bingu. It turned out Yeonki was Bingu's spy, sent to investigate the relationship between his son-in-law and ex-wife. He discovered Taeho still harbored feelings for his ex. For his daughter's happiness, Bingu seemed to have made a certain resolution. Meanwhile, Sunwoo drank alone at home. While watching a video of their family of three in wedding attire, she couldn't help but reminisce about those happier times. Just then, the doorbell rang. Taeho burst in, fresh from an argument with In-kui. His heart was filled with resentment. Taeho demanded Sunwoo stay out of his life. Sunwoo feels both furious and heartbroken. The next day, Sunwoo grows anxious after failing to reach Hanrae. She tracks Hanrae down at her workplace, only for Hanrae to demand Sunwoo never contact her again. Sunwoo realizes In-kui has found Hanrae. She offered to protect Hanrae, but Hanrae refused, fearing In-kui would target Sunwoo. Meanwhile, the dean summoned Sunwoo to his office, proposing a reassignment, and mentioning Yeonki's connection to Bingu. Sunwoo sought out Yeonki to gauge his interest in competing for the vice dean position. Yeonki expressed no interest. Sunwoo finally felt relieved. Meanwhile, Taeho was at home with his daughter. Doking called, saying she'd be home soon, and that her parents would be coming too. But not long after, the doorbell rang. Taeho mistakenly thought it was his wife. Instead, he found In-kui standing there. Taeho promised to give him the money tomorrow, and urged him to leave immediately. However, as In-kui departed, he encountered Doking returning home. Doking grew suspicious upon seeing him, and questioned Taeho upon entering the house. Taeho lied, claiming the man was a newspaper delivery person. That evening, Bingu confronted his daughter, and bluntly stated that Taeho was still in contact with his ex-wife. Doking responded that he knew and understood. Bingu said no more after hearing this. After dinner, Taeho watched Bingu and his wife leave. He then called his company's department head to prepare 10 million won. The next day, Sunwoo was informed by the hospital director that her position as vice president would be replaced by Yeonki. Furthermore, the hospital would make donations in the name of Taeho's company, 100 million won annually for the next 10 years. Sunwoo instantly realized Bingu was involved. She immediately tracked him down at the golf course. Sunwoo argued that no matter how much he donated, interfering in hospital personnel decisions was an abuse of power. Bingu bluntly replied she could leave the hospital if she needed severance pay. He could provide any amount. Sunwoo knew Bingu would do anything for his daughter's happiness, but for Junyoung's sake, Sunwoo resolved to fight to the end. That evening, Sunwoo confronted Yeonki, demanding how he knew Bingu and what scheme he was plotting. Yeonki made no secret of it, admitting he was acting on Bingu's behalf, and that everything was for Sunwoo's sake. Yeonki explained this was merely a temporary measure, and that he had no interest in the vice president position. He promised to step down at the appropriate time, but Sunwoo no longer trusted him. On the way back, Sunwoo received a call from his son. He said something seemed to have happened at Yilin's house. When Sunwoo rushed to Yilin's place, he saw Yilin throwing Jiho's belongings out the door, including their wedding rings. She bluntly stated the divorce papers were ready and would be sent to his office. Only then did Jiho feel an unprecedented despair. Sunwoo approached to ask what had happened. Jiho warned Sunwoo to be careful of Taeho. It turned out Jiho and Yilin were planning to have a child, so the two went to the hospital for preconception tests. While Yilin waited for her husband's examination, she suddenly received a text message. The message message contained suggestive photos of Ji-hoo in bed with another woman. Yilin was utterly shocked upon seeing them. By the time Ji-hoo emerged, Yilin had already left. He couldn't reach his wife no matter how he tried. Just then, Ji-hoo received a multimedia message from his wife. It was filled with photos of him and his lover. This made him realize something. He immediately set out to confront her, but her coworker informed him she had already quit her job. As he was leaving, Tae-ho called. He mentioned the mistress's name. Only then did Ji-hoo realize he'd fallen into Tae-ho's trap. Soon after, Sunwoo found Yilin. She apologized to Yilin. She shouldn't have dragged their family into her revenge. Yilin urged Sunwoo to stop entangling herself with Tae-ho. Leaving was the only way out. Yet, just after leaving Yilin's home, Sunwoo received a call from Han-rae. Han-rae claimed In-kui was carrying a large sum of money. Sunwoo suspected he had been bribed by Tae-ho. After confirming In-kui's address, Sunwoo tracked him down. She tried persuading In-kui to back off while asking if Tae-ho was behind it. She hoped to get a confession but failed. Frustrated, Sunwoo could only send Han-rae away. What they didn't know was that In-kui learned of her departure from Han-rae's colleague. This made him suspect it might be Sunwoo's idea, so he called Tae-ho demanding 30 million won. Unbeknownst to them, Yun-ki witnessed the entire scene. Meanwhile, as Han-rae was leaving, Sunwoo gave her her own scarf. In-kui soon located the station. Just as Han-rae pressed the elevator button to leave, In-kui found her. At the same time, Sunwoo had just gotten into her car to leave. She then noticed money left behind in the passenger seat. When Sunwoo reached the platform, the train had already departed. She assumed Han-rae had left, but then noticed Han-rae's luggage still on the platform. Sunwoo searched the station frantically, only to find the station entrance swarming with people. As she approached, she saw the scarf she'd given Han-rae lying on the ground, drenched in blood. Sunwoo was overcome with horror. Just then, Yun-ki suddenly appeared, trying to take her away. He told Sunwoo the deceased wasn't the person she was looking for. Meanwhile, at home, Docking noticed a wound on Tae-ho's neck. A wave of unease instantly washed over her. However, Tae-ho made excuses to brush it off. The next morning, Docking pressed Tae-ho again about his whereabouts the previous night. Tae-ho lied, claiming he had left the office very late. Unbeknownst to him, Docking had already learned his whereabouts through her subordinates. She felt deeply disappointed by her husband's lies. Nevertheless, Docking revealed In-kui's death at the station. Since Tae-ho was In-kui's sponsor, the police might come questioning him. This news filled Tae-ho with worrying. Meanwhile, Sunwoo tracked down Yun-ki to ask why he'd been at the station the previous night. Yun-ki didn't hide anything, telling Sunwoo he'd encountered Tae-ho and followed him afterward. But Sunwoo was curious how he knew the deceased was In-kui. It turned out Sunwoo had previously reported In-kui to the police as someone threatening her. That's why Yun-ki remembered him. Just then, Han-rae called. She told Sunwoo it was Tae-ho who pushed In-kui down the stairs. Sunwoo was utterly shocked upon hearing this. Soon after, the police found Sunwoo and asked if the scarf at the scene belonged to her. Sunwoo didn't hide anything and truthfully answered. Meanwhile, Han-rae went online and saw the news about In-kui's death. The report mentioned the possibility of homicide. Han-rae feared the police might suspect her. Meanwhile, Tae-ho took his son out to dinner. He tried to pry information about Sunwoo from the previous night out of his son. He even feigned concern for his son's life, but Junyoung saw right through his hypocrisy. He told them to resolve their own issues. Tae-ho was instantly speechless. Sunwoo arranges a private meeting with Han-rae. Han-rae recounts the entire sequence of events to her. It turns out that after finding Han-rae that night, In-kui brutally beat her. Afterwards, he tearfully begged Han-rae to live with him. Han-rae had long seen through him, and resolutely decided to leave. Yet that scarf remained behind on the rooftop. Though Han-rae appeared calm, her heart was filled with terror. Just then, Tae-ho found her and demanded to know In-kui's whereabouts. Upon learning In-kui's location, Tae-ho rushed upstairs. He didn't realize his wedding ring had fallen there. Han-rae confirmed Tae-ho killed In-kui, but Sunwoo believed the police wouldn't accept her word alone. Han-rae handed the wedding ring she found at the scene to Sunwoo, hoping she would handle it properly. Later, Sunwoo returned home just as Tae-ho arrived to pick up his son. Seeing Sunwoo at the station made Tae-ho suspect she had killed In-kui. Yet Sunwoo also suspects Tae-ho is a major suspect. Both sides stubbornly stick to their own versions, trading accusations. Back home, Junyoung presses his mother, demanding to know if she's the killer. He also vents his frustration, saying his parents' divorce has caused him too much trouble. Sunwoo is filled with guilt over this. Meanwhile, Tae-ho is distraught over In-kui's death. Docking discovers bloodstains and a station parking ticket in his clothes. She confronted Tae-ho, demanding if In-kui's death was connected to him. With no choice, Tae-ho recounted that day's events to his wife. Docking questioned why he hadn't clarified things with the police. He told his wife he had seen Sunwoo at the station. Tae-ho suspected Sunwoo and Han-rae had killed In-kui together. That evening, Yun-ki He met with Bingu again, demanding why he had been following Sunwoo, and revealing he'd seen Taeho at the station that night. Convinced, Bingu framed Sunwoo to protect Taeho. Just then, Sunwoo entered. Unbeknownst to her, Han-rae had followed her here. Upon seeing Sunwoo meeting with Bingu, Han-rae suspected Sunwoo was conspiring with Bingu to abandon her. Meanwhile, a nervous Taeho had just left the company when police officers came to arrest him. Han-rae, seeking self-preservation, went to the police station. She called Sunwoo, saying she would handle the situation. Just then, Bingu's phone rang. It was Taeho calling him before heading to the station. Elsewhere, Bingu resolved to abandon his son-in-law. In his heart, only his daughter mattered. Sunwoo retorted, "Then what about your granddaughter?" Ultimately, Bingu relented. Meanwhile, at the police station, Taeho frantically dialed Docking and Bingu's numbers, but neither answered. Just as he felt utterly helpless, Sunwoo appeared at the station. She told the officers that Taeho had been with her when Inkui died. Han-rae immediately stepped forward to refute this, insisting Taeho had been upstairs with Inkui at the time. Sunwoo countered that this was merely Han-rae's assumption. The police then demanded Sunwoo produce evidence. Without hesitation, Sunwoo produced the ring Han-rae had given her, declaring it proved Taeho wasn't at the murder scene. Ultimately, Taeho was released. The next day, Sunwoo waited for Han-rae outside the police station. She reproached Han-rae for reporting the incident without her consent, but Han-rae couldn't accept Inkui's death being ruled a suicide. Meanwhile, Taeho apologized to Bingu for the investigation, but Bingu was dissatisfied that he hadn't handled things with Sunwoo properly. Taeho declared he would have no further involvement with Sunwoo, yet Bingu remained unsatisfied with his answer. He privately reviewed the station surveillance footage. It had completely cleared Taeho of any suspicion of murder. Bingu extended an olive branch by inviting Taeho to play golf, only to be turned down. He was deeply frustrated by Taeho's deliberate avoidance of his father-in-law. Meanwhile, Junyoung overheard classmates gossiping about his mother at school. They claimed the man who died at the station was his mother's lover. This enraged Junyoung, nearly leading to a fight with his classmates. Sunwoo noticed her son's unusual behavior upon returning home and tried to ask why. Junyoung refused to talk to his mother. Sunwoo sought out his classmate Josan for answers. Josan told Sunwoo what had happened at school. Sunwoo was furious upon hearing the story. The next day, she tracked down the mother of the student spreading the rumors. She warned her to keep her son in check. Docking contacted Junyoung privately. She suggested Junyoung live with his father. This way he could escape the rumors, and Sunwoo could live in peace. Junyoung felt somewhat moved by this. Meanwhile, Sunwoo was discussing Junyoung's situation with Yilin when Taeho called, urging her to come home. Upon returning home, Sunwoo found Junyoung packing his belongings and declared he would live with his father. This stunned Sunwoo, who assumed Taeho had encouraged his son to leave, but Taeho helplessly explained it was his son's own request. Watching her son's indifferent back, Sunwoo felt utterly devastated. At Taeho's new home, Junyoung watches Docking bustling about and sees his father spending time with his little sister. He can't shake the feeling he's an outsider. He rushes off to school, choosing to eat instant noodles from a convenience store for breakfast. After losing her son's companionship, Sunwoo found her life unbearably painful. Just as she prepared to go to the mall to buy her son some clothes, she saw Junyoung and Taeho's family enjoying a warm, happy moment together. This left a bitter taste in her mouth, but in truth, Junyoung hadn't accepted Docking. When Taeho urged him to get along with Docking, he firmly rejected his father's suggestion. Sunwoo began contemplating leaving because of her son. She brought alcohol to chat with Yilin. Recalling the past, they couldn't help but feel deeply moved. After talking with Yilin, she began to accept the reality of her departure. Sunwoo started packing her son's clothes. Meanwhile, Taeho, who had just returned home, discovered Docking had prepared a pile of study abroad materials. It turned out she planned to send Junyoung overseas. This led to a heated argument between Taeho and Docking. Unbeknownst to them, Junyoung overheard their entire fight. Frustrated, Taeho invited Ji-hoo out for drinks. The two divorced men sat together, pouring out their troubles. Ji-hoo told Taeho about Sunwoo's plans to leave. Taeho was shocked upon hearing this. He immediately sought out Sunwoo. Sunwoo pushed her son's suitcase toward Taeho. The two then began drinking red wine. Taeho believed that if Sunwoo had forgiven him back then, things might not have turned out this way. He also began regretting his marriage to Docking. Taeho wanted to know if Sunwoo regretted her choice. He thought Sunwoo still harbored lingering feelings for him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gone to the police station to testify for him. Sunwoo did indeed still care for Taeho, but she refused to confront it. She was determined to push him away. Yet Taeho only grew more desperate. Suddenly, they found themselves kissing. After the passion, Taeho splashed water on his face to sober up. Sunwoo tittied the leftover wine on the table, hearing Taeho's phone vibrating incessantly inside his clothes. She urged him to leave immediately. Back home, Taeho was deep in thought. Docking told him their daughter had a fever and asked why he hadn't answered his calls. Taeho lied, saying he'd been drinking with Jihoo. Docking said nothing in response. Meanwhile, after tidying the room, Sunwoo also realized how reckless her earlier actions had been. She felt profound regret. Sunwoo didn't know Junyoung had spent the night at the internet cafe. Junyoung jolted awake again from the nightmare of his father beating his mother. His forehead was drenched in sweat. The internet cafe owner, noticing he was underage, urged him to leave. Junyoung scrambled to his feet and exited the cafe. Unbeknownst to him, his classmate Haekon witnessed the scene. Early morning, Taeho opened the door and called Junyoung to get ready for school, only to find Junyoung returning from outside. Docking detected the smell of smoke on him and asked if he had been smoking. Junyoung immediately denied it, but Taeho took notice. He promptly called Sunwoo to ask if Junyoung smoked. Sunwoo denied it to Taeho, yet she remained unsettled all day. Just then, Sunwoo received a job offer in Bizen. After some thought, Sunwoo still asked Taeho to see her son. For Sunwoo, her son's opinion was extremely important. However, Sunwoo didn't know that after finishing his game at the internet cafe, Junyoung had stolen some snacks, and this scene was witnessed by his classmate Haekon. When Junyoung returned home, Taeho told him that Sunwoo was preparing to leave the city. He wanted to see him before leaving. Hearing this, Junyoung silently ate the stolen snacks, tears streaming down his face. That day, Yilin went to the hospital for a checkup. Afterward, she planned to meet Sunwoo for dinner. Just then, Sunwoo received a call from his son's homeroom teacher. It turned out Haekon had revealed what happened at the internet cafe. Junyoung didn't care at all. Haekon then began humiliating Junyoung. Junyoung flew into a rage and beat Haekon senseless. Sunwoo and Taeho rushed to the school shortly after. Taeho understood his son's violent outburst, but demanded an explanation for the theft. Junyoung claimed it was simply a mistake, arguing that even parents make mistakes. Sunwoo insisted Junyoung must correct his behavior regardless. Junyoung flatly declared he didn't want to go to school anymore. The next day, Sunwoo visited Haekon in the hospital to apologize. Instead, she was confronted by Haekang's mother. The woman slandered Junyoung as a bad kid, claiming he was responsible for the frequent thefts at school. Sunwoo couldn't bear it. Returning home, she searched Junyoung's room and found the stolen items hidden there. Sunwoo couldn't believe it. For Junyoung's mental and physical well-being, Sunwoo sought out Yeonki. She learned from him that Junyoung had exhibited serious issues long ago. Yeonki advised her to address the current situation first. Just then, Sunwoo received a text from the homeroom teacher, urging her to resolve Junyoung's assault on a classmate promptly. That evening, she drank alone at home. After much deliberation, she decided to text Taeho, reminding him not to be late for Haekang's hospital visit the next day. But Docking saw the message. The next day, Docking called Haekang's mother. Sunwoo and Taeho arrived at the hospital under his parents' urging. Junyoung reluctantly apologized to Haekon, yet Haekon seemed unwilling to accept it. Seeing this, Sunwoo helplessly knelt down, pleading for forgiveness. Just then, Docking suddenly appeared. Through her persuasion, Haekang's mother chose not to pursue the matter further. The situation was finally resolved. Sunwoo then returned to her post to continue working. At that moment, Junyoung sent a text message, urging Sunwoo to leave. Reading the message, Sunwoo felt deeply distressed. This only strengthened her resolve to leave the city. She sought out Taeho again to discuss matters concerning her son, hoping he would raise the boy well. Sunwoo then asked Taeho, which day was it that Junyoung spent the night at the internet cafe? Taeho replied, it was the day we were together. Sunwoo suddenly realized why her son was acting this way. It might be connected to the two of them. Sunwoo and Taeho then went together to find Junyoung, who was playing baseball at the training field. They confirmed the truth. That night, Junyoung had returned to his mother's house. He witnessed Taeho and Sunwoo in an intimate embrace. His eyes were filled with shock and rage. Taeho tried to explain to his son, but Junyoung dismissed it as just another parental excuse. He shouted at them to stop talking. Watching his son walk away, Sunwoo urged Taeho to take Junyoung home immediately. Taeho then brought Junyoung back home. Docking wanted to talk to Junyoung alone. She hoped Junyoung could live peacefully here. Junyoung had suffered greatly from his parents' actions. Docking urged him to regulate his behavior from now on, and always inform her before going out. Junyoung agreed to her requests. The next day, Mingsu arrived at work to find Sunwoo absent. Just then, one of Sunwoo's patients came in with severe abdominal pain. Seeing the urgency, Mingsu took over the examination. Later, the patient's family came to confront Sunwoo after the patient's condition worsened. Mingsu explained to the family that the patient hadn't followed medical instructions for tests, and it wasn't the doctor's fault. However, the family unreasonably insisted on suing Sunwoo and a hospital. The director felt Sunwoo shouldn't have made such a mistake. Sunwoo then stated she would resign. Hearing this, the director panicked. To keep Sunwoo, he offered Sunwoo a week to resolve matters, yet Sunwoo seemed resolute about resigning. Returning to her office, she packed her belongings and left the hospital. The director could only sigh helplessly at Sunwoo's resignation letter. Sunwoo then traveled to the region where her former colleague Kan-hee worked to clear her mind. Kan-hee inquired if she planned to take the Bison position. Sunwoo replied she wanted to take a break soon. Yeon-ki learned Sunwoo's whereabouts from Kan-hee. Meanwhile, Tae-ho, unable to find Sunwoo, appeared dazed and lost. That evening, he went to Sunwoo's home hoping to find her. He pressed the doorbell repeatedly, but there was no response. Only then did Tae-ho realize who he truly loved. The next day, he went to the hospital to discuss the investment with the director. Tae-ho appeared distracted. Whenever he passed Sunwoo's clinic room, he couldn't help but glance inside. Meanwhile, Kan-hee learned from the front desk that Sunwoo had left early that morning. Recalling Sunwoo's words that everyone might be better off without her, Kan-hee suddenly understood something. He immediately called Yeon-ki. Yeon-ki rushed out of his office and told the receptionist to cancel all consultations for the day. His frantic state was noticed by Ming-soo, who asked what was wrong. Yeon-ki didn't hide anything. Coincidentally, Tae-ho witnessed this scene. He asked Sunwoo what had happened. Meanwhile, Sunwoo sat alone on the beach. She then took off her outer clothes and walked step by step toward the sea. When Yeon-ki reached the beach, he found only Sunwoo's clothes. Just as he was about to call for help, he spotted a figure being swept away by the waves. He plunged into the sea without hesitation. Sunwoo was successfully rescued. After regaining consciousness, Sunwoo looked at Yeon-ki and broke down in tears. Tae-ho witnessed this scene, but did not approach. Instead, he silently walked away. That evening, Da-king, hoping to help Junyoung get along better with Haekon at school, invited their family over for a gathering at her home. As the two families chatted happily, Da-king suddenly heard her daughter crying. She headed upstairs. Upon entering the room, she found Junyoung there too. Da-king suspected Junyoung had caused her daughter's tears. An argument immediately erupted between them. Tae-ho entered to urge his son to calm down, but Da-king wouldn't relent. Seeing Junyoung talk back, Tae-ho, in a fit of impulse, slapped his son. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sunwoo suddenly woke up. She quickly charged her phone and called her son. Junyoung was heartbroken upon receiving his mother's call. He begged her to come pick him up. Sunwoo, still recovering, immediately drove to retrieve her son. She soon arrived at Da-king's house. Da-king, recognizing Sunwoo, tried to shoo her away, but Sunwoo called her son directly, instructing him to come downstairs. Da-king saw Junyoung heading out and tried to stop him, only to be stopped by his father. Sunwoo rushed forward and embraced her son. Just as she was about to leave with him, Da-king chased after them. She pleaded with Sunwoo not to take Junyoung away. Sunwoo understood Da-king's actions stemmed from her desire for a complete family. She refused and revealed to Da-king that Tae-ho had slept with her. Late at night, Tae-ho returned home to find Da-king sitting alone in the kitchen. He asked where their son was. Da-king didn't answer. Tae-ho sensed something was wrong. He rushed upstairs and discovered Young had already left home. He demanded to know what had happened. Instead, Da-king confronted him, asking if he had slept with Sunwoo on the day Junyoung went to the internet cafe. After a long silence, Tae-ho admitted it. Da-king was devastated upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Sunwoo told her son that Tae-ho had been the person who had been with her the longest in her life. Though they were divorced, she sometimes briefly missed Tae-ho. Sunwoo then apologized to her son. Junyoung wept bitterly upon hearing this, but the news that he was a thief had already spread throughout the school. Now, Junyoung only wanted to leave this place with his mother and start anew somewhere else. After thinking it over all night, Da-king decided to pretend this incident never happened. She didn't want her daughter to become as pitiful as Junyoung. Meanwhile, Sunwoo was packing up with her son, preparing to leave. Unexpectedly, Tae-ho showed up once more. Tae-ho refused to give up on Junyoung. He kept apologizing to his son, but when Junyoung faced Tae-ho's apology, he bluntly stated that if he came again, he would call the police. Tae-ho never imagined his son would react this way. Furious, he yanked Sunwoo out of the house. Da-king's subordinate was still monitoring outside. Tae-ho couldn't understand why Sunwoo had revealed what happened that day, but Sunwoo couldn't tolerate him laying a hand on Junyoung. Tae-ho declared he would never give up on Junyoung. Meanwhile, Da-king was reviewing photos sent by her subordinate. Soon after, her mother called. She informed Da-king that Sunwoo had decided to leave the city, and had even listed the house for sale through an agent. Upon learning this, Da-king went to Sunwoo's house with the agent. She entered Sunwoo's room and began rummaging through everything. Soon, she discovered the wedding photos of Sunwoo and Tae-ho. Just then, Yilin's voice echoed from downstairs. Da-king tried to slip away quietly, but Yilin spotted her. Yilin reminded her that Tae-ho wouldn't easily forget Sunwoo. Hearing this, Da-king stormed out. Yet after Da-king Docking left. Yilin unexpectedly paid the agent. Disturbed by the day's events, Docking couldn't sleep that night. Her mind was consumed by Taeho's infidelity, so she arranged to meet Sunwoo, stating she would persuade Taeho to relinquish custody of their son, so they wouldn't meet privately, using their child as an excuse. Sunwoo saw Docking was still obsessed, and played the song Taeho had used to propose to her. Docking recognized it immediately, as Taeho had played the same song when proposing to her. Sunwoo then brought Docking back to her home. She emptied the clothes from the storage box. These garments were identical to those Taeho had bought for Docking. Sunwoo intended to reveal that Taeho had merely seen her as a replacement. Docking struggled to accept this truth. Sunwoo urged her, insisting this was her final chance to break free from Taeho. The next day, Taeho met with investors carrying the script. At checkout, he discovered his card had been cancelled. Returning to the company, he realized Bingu had orchestrated everything. Back home, he found movers clearing out his belongings. Bingu informed Taeho that Docking wanted a divorce and demanded he relinquish custody of their daughter. Taeho tried to hold on to Docking, but Docking had seen through everything. Having lost everything, Taeho sat in grief by the doorway. He spotted Sunwoo not far away. Taeho approached Sunwoo in his car, venting his frustration. Yet Sunwoo didn't engage at all. He simply drove away. But on the way, Sunwoo recalled Junyoung's worries about her father. This tugged at Sunwoo's heartstrings. He turned back to find Taeho. He pulled out a wad of cash and flung it onto the ground. He told Taeho to make plans for his future life. Taeho accused Sunwoo of ruining his entire life. Enraged, Sunwoo got into the car, intending to run him over, but in the end, she slammed on the brakes. Time passed, and a month later, the Bingu family had left the city because of Taeho. Sunwoo, however, returned with her son. She also returned to the hospital. Mingsu informed Sunwoo that Taeho's current condition was not good. She asked Sunwoo if she wants to visit Taeho. Sunwoo listens thoughtfully. Later, she returns home after shopping. She calls out to her son but gets no response. Searching upstairs, she finds Junyoung isn't home. Sunwoo calls her son's phone. She discovers Junyoung's phone left on the sofa. A note is also left on the sofa. It says Taeho took Junyoung away. Sunwoo panicked instantly. She immediately called Taeho to ask if her son was with him, but Taeho refused to answer. Sunwoo couldn't help but lose her temper. She jumped into her car and sped down the road. Meanwhile, Taeho told his son that his own father had also run away from home at his age. His father never returned home after that. Seeing his father nearly out of his mind, Junyoung felt utterly terrified. Soon after, Sunwoo arrived. Junyoung rushed to his mother's side. Seeing her son was safe, Sunwoo invited Taeho to get in the car and go out for a meal. At the dinner table, just because of Sunwoo's single caring remark, Taeho expressed his desire to stay with them. Junyoung declared it was all dad who ruined everything. Sunwoo wanted her son to give his father more time. Taeho then declared he wanted a fresh start with mother and son. Sunwoo insisted their relationship was completely over, but Taeho remained adamant, refusing to give up. Junyoung couldn't bear to listen anymore and excused himself to the restroom. Sunwoo found Taeho unreasonable, yet still offered to help him until he stabilized his life. Just then, Junyoung emerged from the restroom and told his mother she should just leave. After settling the bill, Sunwoo urged her son to say goodbye to his father, but Junyoung refused to acknowledge his father. Taeho declared he wouldn't appear again. Suddenly, a truck sped by. Taeho charged forward without flinching. Sunwoo rushed over in panic. The truck stopped just in time. Taeho wasn't hit. Sunwoo pulled Taeho to the roadside. Junyoung couldn't bear seeing his parents hugging each other. Terrified, he ran away. Sunwoo rushed after him, only to find her son had thrown his phone by the roadside. Taeho also tried to chase after his son, but had no idea which direction he'd gone. Time quickly passed to 1 year later. Taeho seemed to have truly changed. He began working diligently and positively, but he still occasionally asked Sunwoo if she had any news about their son. Meanwhile, far away, Docking started a new life, yet when others showed affection, she simply smiled it off. At home, Sunwoo waited for his runaway son to return, while reflecting on his own actions over the years. The next morning, Sunwoo ate breakfast alone. Then someone opened the front door. Sure enough, his son had finally come back.